Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There we go. Curtain opens. Continuing after a very active weekend. Continuing with Uddhava Gita, Canto 11, Chapter 10, verses 4 and 5. Krishna is speaking to Uddhava. He's summarized the previous three chapters, chapters 7, 8, and 9, which are describing the kind of detachment that the Avadhuta Brahmana had, and now this is describing how you get there, the process, Abhideya. Translation for text number 4. One who has fixed me within his mind as the goal of his life should give up activities based on sense gratification and should instead execute work governed by the regular principles for advancement. When, however, one is fully engaged in searching out the ultimate truth of the soul, one should not accept the scriptural injunctions governing fruitive activities. Interesting, huh? Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of that verse. One who has fixed his mind on me, making me the goal of life, should give up activities of sense gratification and should instead engage in the regulated practice of devotional service. On the other hand, when one is fully endeavoring for self-realization, he has no need to follow the scriptural injunctions regarding fruitive activities. The BBT purport reads, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the word jigyasayam sampravrittaha refers to one who is a yoga arudha, or advanced in the yoga process. That's in the third line, jigyasayam sampravritto. Jigyasayam, in search for spiritual truth, sampravrittaha, being perfectly engaged. So that's the yogi. And here's the translation for verses 3 and 4 from chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. A person is said to have attained to yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Unquote. The example may be given that an ordinary man will try to enjoy the company of women for material sense pleasure. This is called pravritta karma, or the path of sense gratification. A religious person will also enjoy the company of a woman, but under the regular principles of the varnashram system. However, one who is fully absorbed in spiritual advancement will ultimately give up all sense gratification derived from sexual association, either regulated or illicit. Similarly, in the stage of pravritta karma, or ordinary sense gratification, one will eat whatever pleases his tongue. On the other hand, a materialistic devotee will sometimes cook sumptuous preparations and offer them to the deity, not in order to satisfy the Lord, but rather with the intention of satisfying his own tongue and belly. However, one who is in his sampravrita, or fully engaged in spiritual consciousness, is never interested in simply gratifying his tongue. He avoids ordinary foods prepared by materialistic persons, and just for the purpose of keeping his body fit and serving Krishna, he eats moderate quantities of food that has first been offered to the deity for the deity's pleasure. The process of spiritualization gradually brings the conditioned soul from the lowest point of materialistic consciousness to total absorption in loving service of the personality of Godhead. In the beginning, one is taught to dovetail one's enjoying propensities by first offering to Krishna the fruit of one's work. In the advanced stage, however, the impulse to execute fruitive activities, karma chodanam, is absent, and one simply engages in the loving service of the Lord without any selfish motive. For example, a renounced sannyasi preaching Krishna consciousness, or even a renounced householder preaching Krishna consciousness, is not required to execute all the injunctions governing sense gratification in family life. Ultimately, every human being should take to the transcendental duties of Krishna consciousness rather than working to fulfill one's own desires and then offering the results of Krishna. One should fully engage in pleasing the Lord directly according to his own intimate desires, Krishna's intimate desires. Paragraph, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, any attempt to enjoy the material world, either religiously or irreligiously, ultimately will be full of contradictions. One should come to the platform of desirelessness, pure love of Godhead, and thus solve all the problems of life. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur's commentary. It's short. There is no need for those who are engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord to perform fruitive activities with the desire to enhance their worldly enjoyment. One should remain aloof from the activities of sense gratification and instead engage in unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Engagement in devotional service to the Supreme Lord is real freedom from material desires. The paths of sense gratification and renunciation are always full of contradictions, whereas the service of the Supreme Lord is the doubtless path of perfection. And, that was Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary. Here's the gloss of Vishwanath's. A materialistic person does whatever is pleasing to his senses. One who acts according to religious principles regulates his material enjoyment in a way that is prescribed in the scriptures. Those who are advancing toward the transcendental platform, however, desist from all material activities of sense gratification. In Bhagavad Gita 6:3-4, it is stated, and it gives the translation again. Here's Vishwanath's commentary. The person whose intelligence takes support of me alone performs actions without desire and gives up karmas for material results. Such a person who is situated in the stage after inquiry, who has reached the stage of yoga-rudha, does not care for daily or periodic karmas, since he is not qualified for that. Not qualified for that means he's not interested. It's not his adhikar, it's not his attraction. And then he again quotes Bhagavad Gita 6, 3.3 to 4. And Jiva Goswami in his Krama Sandarbha. The person dedicated to me engages in karmas without desire and gives up karmas for material results. The person completely fixed in yoga rudha does not care for daily or periodic karmas. Karmas in this sense means prescribed duties, not just any material activity. Paragraph. The person dedicated to me gives up karmas for material results, performs karmas without desire, and, if fixed in me completely, gives up karmas completely. Karmas completely means the prescribed duties for getting something. Without taking shelter of me, all three actions become useless. The affix sum in sam pravrita indicates complete renunciation of matter. The Gita says, in Bhagavad Gita 6.3 and 4. And then comes this celebrated, if you remember from chapter 9, the explanation of why many gurus. Here's the one that says one guru. So, Canto 11, Chapter 10, Text 5. One who has accepted me as the supreme goal of life should strictly observe the scriptural injunctions forbidding sinful activities and, as far as possible, should execute the injunctions prescribing minor regulative duties such as cleanliness. Ultimately, however, one should approach a bona fide spiritual master as full in knowledge of me, as I am, who is peaceful, and who by spiritual elevation is non-different from me. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, a little different. One who has surrendered unto me, accepting me as the goal of life, should follow all the rules that forbid sinful activities. One should also try his best to follow all the sub-religious principles, such as those dealing with cleanliness. One should approach a bona fide spiritual master who is intimately related to me and who is thus very peaceful and is not different from me. The BBT purport is kind of long, medium long. The word yaman refers to major regulative injunctions necessary for preserving one's purity. In the Krishna consciousness movement, all bona fide members must give up eating meat, fish, and eggs. They must also avoid intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. The word abhigyam indicates that one cannot at any time perform such forbidden activities, even in difficult circumstances. The word niyaman refers to less obligatory injunctions, such as bathing 3 times daily. In certain difficult situations, we may not bathe 3 times daily and yet may still maintain one's spiritual position. But if one engages in sinful, forbidden activities, even in difficult circumstances, there will undoubtedly be a spiritual fall down. Ultimately, as explained in Upadesha Amrita, mere adherence to rules and regulations cannot give one spiritual perfection. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master who is mad abhigyam, or in full knowledge of the personal form of Godhead. The word mat, or me, negates the possibility of a bona fide spiritual master having an impersonal conception of the absolute truth. Furthermore, the guru must be in complete control of his senses, semicolon. Therefore, he is called Shanta, or peaceful. Because of being completely surrendered to the mission of the Lord, such a spiritual master is Mad Atmakam, or not different from the personality of Godhead. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, short. It is the eternal duty of everyone to worship his spiritual master who is always engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. The devotees of the Lord are always engaged in devotional service, which is concomitantly inclusive of activities such as yama and niyama. If one is indifferent to the service of Lord Hari, one's guru, and the Vaishnavas, one can never achieve eternal benefit. We're almost done. This is Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath's commentary, even shorter. One should very carefully control the senses and follow the scriptural injunctions for morality, such as nonviolence and cleanliness. These rules will be more fully described later on. One who is intelligent should faithfully render service to a self-realized spiritual master who has full knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is Vishwanath's commentary, 2 sentences. However, this person should respectfully follow prohibitions, like nonviolence, and to the best of his ability observe rules, like cleanliness. The Lord will explain this further in the 19th chapter. He should worship the Guru with great affection. So I was expecting a much more elaborate description of the one Guru compared to the multiple Gurus. It's not there. It was in the previous section. But the qualification of the one Guru eclipses the multiple Gurus, or not eclipses, but the summation of whatever the multiple Gurus might give, it's to be found within the one Guru, the qualified Guru that has control of its senses, understands Krishna perfectly. So I think it's clear. The Bhagavad Gita 6, chapter 6, verse 3 and 4, these 3 stages. The dovetailing stage, I have a desire, I do that which I have a desire to do and offer results. That's a beginning stage. And then one neglects those activities that are intended for getting something, but I do the regulative activities of devotional service. And then one is completely beyond any attraction for anything material. A pure devotional service standard. So, stages. Because remember, the question is how to overcome the attachment to family life. So there's stages in attachment to things that are temporary in work. These questions regularly come up in Bhakti Vriksha gatherings or Bhagavad Gita study groups. The common way that it's said is, how do I balance this and that? It's not balance, it's principle-based. Okay, and there's stages. Here's a nice image. There's a path, there's Krishna on the path, there's a Bhagavad Gita and the path. A nice peacock behind Krishna. One who has fixed me within his mind as the goal of life should give up activities based on sense gratification and should instead execute work governed by the regulative principles for advancement. That's the indicating the first and the second stages. So the first stage is regulations for offering results, regulations for letting go of sense gratification and attachment to the results. When, however, one is fully engaged in searching out the ultimate truth of the soul, one should not accept the scriptural injunctions governing fruitive activities, like the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas, for example. And then text 4 again. The process of spiritual realization gradually brings a conditioned soul from the lowest point of materialistic consciousness to total absorption in loving service of the personality of Godhead. In the beginning, one is taught to dovetail one's enjoying propensities by first offering to the Lord the fruit of one's work. In the advanced stage, however, the impulse to execute fruitive activities, karma chodanam, is absent, and one simply engages in the loving service of the Lord without any selfish motive. Progressive stages, it's good to understand them. Here's a very interesting graphic. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, any attempt to enjoy the material world, either religiously or irreligiously, ultimately will be full of contradictions. Isn't that an interesting illustration of contradiction? Very clever. Very clever. How she comes up with these, I don't know. And the wall on the background is a brick wall that's got a camera flash look. And on the right is the graffiti people putting a peace sign, guarding with a gun. Very clever. Text 5, this is the final image, beautiful painting there. One who has accepted me as the supreme goal of life should strictly observe the scriptural injunctions forbidding sinful activities and, as far as possible, should execute the injunctions prescribing minor regulative duties such as cleanliness. Ultimately, however, one should approach a bona fide spiritual master who is in full knowledge of me as I am, who is peaceful, and who by spiritual elevation is none different from me. Great painting. I don't know how she comes up with these. Notice Krishna's left hand is on Prabhupada's arm or shoulder. Very nice. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. So let's see if there's some discussion. Pretty straightforward. It's a quiet morning. People are either exhausted from fasting from yesterday or partied out or something. I don't know.
Work governed by fruitive activities is prescribed duties. That's what is meant.
Say it again.
Work governed by fruitive activities, something like that. I thought in the first one.
The first one?
Yes, Maharaj. Work governed by one before this.
Work governed by the regulated principles for advancement.
Is meant here.
Is that clear? I mean,
Yeah, does that mean prescribed duties?
It means karma kanda duties.
Regulative principles means we know the four regulative principles.
No.
Not that.
Not that.
Okay.
In karma kanda, there's so many regulations for performing the yagyas and performing the duties of when you're not doing the yagyas, and there's so many regulations. I mean, I don't know the detail, but there's regulations for those who cook. That's householders cook. There's some regulation that you're to perform because living entities are killed by fire. And cooking is a necessity, but cooking is also connected with something that's for enjoyment. So there's regulations connected with those activities. Prabhupada ki jai.
Maharaj ki